of exciting news.
Exciting news.
Exciting news. This is exciting for you guys as well. Is everybody ready?
Exciting.
Say yes to your computer screen if you're ready. Actually, comment yes down below if you're ready.
It just validates him. Don't do it.
This episode of the Old Warlock actually has a sponsor.
What?
Yep.
It does not.
The Old Warlock is sponsored today by Old Warlock Games. Thank you, Old Warlock Games. Everyone cheer. Woo!
That was more than a bit self-serving.
Well,
but you know,
nothing wrong with it.
No, okay, you're right.
Check out the Deck of Contradiction. Might be for sale somewhere.
Maybe.
We don't know. We made it. We're not sure.
We created it. I had a successful Kickstarter for it. We don't know where it's available outside of Kickstarter, but we'll have to see if we can come up with something.
Here in the next little while.
I'll let you know.
But because we've gotten a lot of comments criticizing how long it takes us to start our content, here's the intro.
So,
was that too long? Oh. You want us to get started more quickly?
He really gets incensed about it.
There's only like 2 or 3 people who have said something about it, but it's like, come on, man. We get there. It's part of the experience. You're just hanging out with your buddies.
It's part of the Old Warlock experience.
Sipping some lime polar seltzer. There's really nothing more refreshing.
There really isn't. It is something.
Which is why today we're sponsored.
No, we're not. That's the thing. Okay, today in today's video, I have been doing some reading. Those of you who follow the channel know that I love to read old magazines related to Dungeons and Dragons, early role-playing, that kind of thing. I was going through Different Worlds magazine from November of 1981, which was about the time that I was just getting underway with playing D&D. And in this particular edition of Different Worlds magazine, there was an article by a man named Howard Mailer. Mahler, maybe, but I'm going to say Mailer because it flows better for me.
Sure.
This is part of an ongoing series, I believe. I need to take a closer look, and if there are more things like this, I will be bringing them to your attention, because I thought this was a fun article, and you have not seen it.
I have not.
It was called Training the Novice GM. Now, the thing that I liked about this was that it approached... He talked about a subject that I often bring up here on the channel, and that is the attention to detail that can have so many benefits in the way you run your campaign.
We're pro huge amounts of detail.
Very much so. But this really brought out one of the, not detail for detail's sake, but how important, and we often do it just detail for detail's sake because that's the person that I am.
Just for fun.
But this really brought home the idea that detail can play such an important role in the game itself. And he brought up some good examples as to how that can be, but we're going to jump into this real quick here. Or we're going to jump into this immediately, and then we're going to go over what Mr. Mailer had to say. So I have to read most of this because it was largely a text article. There were not a lot of illustrations.
No pictures.
No pickies. But let's just get started with this. And then you will be able to learn right along with our viewers because you have no knowledge of this article, which I recently found.
It's true.
He starts off by giving an example from a D&D evening. Let's get started with that. Our inexperienced band saddled up and rode west out of the one-horse town of Newton. When I first read that, I thought he was playing a Western game, but he's not. After 2 hours' ride, what should they come upon but a dark cave mouth right by the side of the trail? The fighters charged in with swords drawn, followed by the rest of the party. Inside, they found a white dragon. Fortunately, it was asleep. The party gained surprise, and it was only a sub-adult. In the 2 rounds of free attacks, the party managed to subdue the dragon. There were rules for this in early D&D, which only the dragon only had a minimal amount of hit points, so they were able to subdue the dragon pretty quickly. Our unscathed visitors returned to Newton with wealth beyond measure, as well as a captive dragon. After their first game, the players were all really excited, and 2 of them were already thinking of how they might set up their own kingdom. Our novice game master is satisfied that he got through this first try of this strange new game. However, he is a little perplexed as to why the players were able to easily win against the nastiest monster he had, and to easily get the biggest treasure. He satisfied himself that next time he would be able to give the players more of a challenge by putting in a very old dragon. Okay, so this is an issue that we've seen in a lot of the discussions we've had on the channel, in that your monsters are not powerful enough, and we have talked about how when you have really powerful characters, you have to ramp up the power of the monsters that they encounter in order to make the game interesting.
Sometimes you do.
In order to keep the threat of death for the characters ever present in their minds.
Yeah.
But this article uses this description to talk a little bit about how just making a bigger, badder monster is not the way to go about this. And I agree 100% with what he ends up saying in this. So he goes on to say, okay, where did our novice DM or GM go wrong? Article continues. I have seen similar scenes many times, particularly at conventions. Yes.
Sure.
When it is a novice GM involved, there is every reason to hope that he or she will improve. However, if similar things happen to someone who has been refereeing for some time, what you have is a GM who is too lazy or thoughtless to set up a consistent world.
Consistent worlds are something we've talked about a lot.
We have.
And we're very careful with everything we make, to even like down to the economics. Gold is always worth the same amount. You can buy similar amounts of stuff, unless there's something that changes that.
Yeah, so inflation because of something in the story.
Sure, yeah. But yeah, making sure that everything continue, but we think that's very important.
Yeah, consistency, yeah.
Yeah.
He says, I chose a dragon hunt merely as an example, but it is a very good one. I have found that how a GM handles dragons is a good indication of other more important things. Has the GM ever thought things out from the monster's point of view, for instance? So what he's saying is, and this is something that I was guilty of in the very early years that I played. I know a lot of dungeon masters who still play this way. Do you have a level of detail attached to your monsters to make them an interesting component of your world, or are they just there because you rolled them up on a random table and it gives your players something to kill?
Yeah. So
he states that you need to ask questions such as, where did the dragon get the treasure? How long has he or she had it? How long has it been gathering it? I would doubt that he could have had it for long, as it was so easily taken by a ragtag bunch of humans in this example. Any other group of armed humans with the bravery or stupidity to rush into the cave would have had a very good chance of succeeding with this particular scenario that he mentioned. Even a dozen peasants with pitchforks would have had a chance if led by one fanatic. I would theorize that maybe this dragon got the treasure from his or her parents when he left, or was kicked out of home. How long has the dragon used the cave as a lair? Once again, I would assume for not too long. Is this dragon unusual or typical? If he were typical and all dragons were this wealthy and stupid, then dragons would be nearing extinction. Perhaps humans have just moved into this region in the last few years and are in the process of diminishing the dragon population explosion. In that case, there would be some young dragons who were forced to take ridiculous sites for lairs since all the good spots were already taken. So he mentions that's the beginning level of detail and questions that the dungeon master or the game master should be asking themselves since they have decided to integrate this particular monster into their campaign.
Yeah.
But this next bit of detail that he says should be included with this particular dragon in this case, this next level of detail I think is almost crucial to maintaining a game that is not a Monty Hall game, and one that has a level of balance in it that you can the characters, if you have this level of balance, if you have and that you combine that with consistency, then the players are going to understand when they should rush in and when they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And if the players know, well, there are a lot of other details about that dragon in, say, Jim's campaign, they're going to think twice about it, and they're going to ferret out that information rather than just saying, it's just a dragon, we're going to go in and kill it.
And that consistency can be however you want to play the game. Like, we recognize that our way of having a little bit more dangerous of a world that your characters can be killed more easily in is not everybody's cup of tea.
Right.
So if you're playing a game where you would rather have characters that are extremely powerful and beings that are less so, or at least are maybe more closely matched as a rule to where the characters are, then that's fine. But just making sure that across the board, all of the dragons behave this way. And if you as a GM get frustrated with characters killing something too easily, your immediate response should not just be, here's this big enormous thing that's gonna kill you next time, because then that takes away, the process of decision making that the characters have to go through. They can't go through that process logically. You have to offer them the opportunity to come to those conclusions themselves, and if you don't, then that just ruins the experience for the players.
In our perspective, from our perspective, but that is exactly right. If you don't have a level of detail that you apply, the characters, you hit the nail on the head. The players, if they don't have a logical sequence of thoughts that they can follow through consistently in your campaign to come to a conclusion about whether or not they should do something, you lose a lot in terms of making your world seem real in people's minds.
But it's not a real world. We know
that. But you know what we're talking about. But let's go on, because he puts some tactics in for how you should end up doing this. So as far as that level of detail is concerned, these are the kinds of thought processes that you would want to ascribe to the dragon in the example. First, the dragon would camouflage its lair or choose one that is not easily visible from a well-traveled path. Well, of course.
Sure.
So even if you get a random roll that says dragon, and then you roll a dice and it says the players will encounter the dragon off of the encounter table, you don't necessarily have to make that an easy encounter. You don't have to have that be something that they stumble upon like they would a tree root sticking out of the side of the path.
Yeah.
You need to think this through and you need to give the dragon, in this case, intelligence and a logical approach to its own existence. Right. As a flying creature, the dragon's lair would be very difficult to get to except by flying. Think of an eagle's nest high up on a cliff.
Sure.
The dragon would fly patrols regularly, covering a wide range, perhaps 10 miles in radius or more around its lair. Presumably, these would be at an extremely high altitude where he could see over an extremely wide range, but not be more than a dot in the sky to those on the ground. I am assuming that dragons have exceptionally good vision, as do birds that prey from high altitudes.
Sure.
This might not stop every small band from sneaking by him, but he would spot even single individuals who are traveling openly. Large bands of men or armies would not have a chance of going undetected without the use of magic. Of course, the dragon would also be hunting for food while he was patrolling. It goes without saying that the exact location of his lair will be a closely guarded secret. Only an idiot, or a novice GM, would ever let humans escape who have discovered the lair but are now in the dragon's power. Adventurers who lose, but some of whom are allowed to escape, tend to come back with a more powerful group. Using the knowledge they gained on their first attempt, they are very likely to win, which is fine, but there has to be a level of knowledge gained to use as a tool or weapon to overcome the dragon. So that's a big part of setting things up for your campaign. Give the players knowledge that they can then use to better their position in overcoming obstacles. And it could be a dragon, it could be a dungeon, it could be anything.
And I like the reference to the dragon eating, because I think that's little things like that are things that get lost super easily when it comes to NPCs. With characters, maybe not so much, unless you play with the food is always available kind of way, which again is fine. But we always have to figure out when we're making dungeons or making lairs or whatever, how are they getting food? Where are they getting water? Are they having any sort of social interaction? How did they get there in the first place? Why are they there? What's their plan for leaving? Every single NPC has that agency, and they have those requirements. We can't just stick orcs 7 layers down in a dungeon and have them be there indefinitely, because they have to eat somehow. They have to get food. There has to be a reason for them being there. Now, if they're hiding for something and maybe they've brought a big store of food with them, that's fine, but that has to be written in somehow. That has to, even if it doesn't play any real role in the character's interaction with those NPCs, maybe once they kill the orcs, they find a bunch of food. Because even when it's not super important to the story that you're playing, you never know how it might be.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Because I think that, and I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me, where I have come up with details to satisfy the situation in my own mind. And I will say, well over 50% of the time, the players never understand those details. They never get all of those details.
Yeah.
But I cannot tell you how many times I have come up with those details, and the players have ended up using them in ways that I never dreamed they would be useful. So it's a very important thing to have that level of detail available, because at the end of the day, you don't know which direction it's going to go, and it could spawn an entirely new adventure.
Yeah.
But let's continue with this.
Yeah.
When a dragon senses that his efforts to hide his lair have failed, he will change its location. He would be wise to always have a secondary location already prepared. In any case, it is a good idea to change location fairly regularly. Only the most powerful dragons with excellent locations and too much treasure to move, such as Smaug in Tolkien's The Hobbit, can afford to stay in the same place very long. Even Smaug ended up staying too long in the same place. If possible, now this is a part that I really love. If possible, the dragon will attempt to get allies in the neighborhood. For example, a tribe of goblins might be useful to signal the approach of strangers, in exchange for which the dragon will leave them alone. No one else will dare live that close to the dragon. So just the mere presence of the dragon protects the goblins, and the goblins are then in
cahoots
with the dragon. That's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
No one else will dare live that close to the dragon, so that the goblins gain a degree of safety for themselves. 2 or more dragons might be willing to cooperate when humans or other vermin are approaching close to both of their territories, not to mention the fact that the dragons might be friends, relatives, or potential mates. Let us assume that the dragon does spot an approaching band of humans at some different distance from his lair. He should take full advantage of his ability to wait for a good time to attack. For example, why not wait until they are busy fighting something or climbing a cliff, or while most of them are sleeping at night? Side note, an interesting way to harass them is to fill a large basket with 100 stones that weigh about a pound each, and then dump the stones while flying over the party. A stone from a height of 1/3 of a mile, which is out of the range of most spells and arrows, would do considerable amount of damage. I don't think a particular stone would have even a 1% chance of hitting a particular target from that height. However, with a large number of stones hitting in the general area occupied by the party, it should not be surprising if a few stones hit. Even stones that miss should have an effect on the morale of the party. Maybe player characters would be too stupid or greedy to be worried, but hired men-at-arms certainly would be worried by such an unanswered attack.
And I think it's important to find balance with this, because using 4 dragons and for sentient characters, it's super important to try and play them or sentient non-player characters. It's important to play them as characters when you're the GM.
Yes.
You have to assume that role-playing mantle from time to time, and you have to lean into who the character is, what their motivation, or the NPC is, what their motivations are, what they're doing. But I think that, like, the basket example is a great example for dragons, but even if there's some kind of NPC that's like a giant spider, they don't have high intelligence. They're not really sentient beings unless you write it in that they are sentient beings. But even so, you have to play that as though it's a giant spider. You have to run it through its decision-making survival process of, okay, this is a dark spot where I can lay my eggs. I have easy access to food, maybe just on the outside of this dungeon. There's water in here. It's dry on the ceiling, so I can put my webs up there and leave the eggs up there. Even stuff like that, when there's no external, like, thinking motivation behind stuff, you have to have a reason for creatures doing certain things.
Right. And again, not just, I've rolled the dice, here's the monster that came up on the table, I will put it out there, I know its hit points and its armor class, I'm good to go.
And that's not to say that we're discounting the random generation tables, because we use them all the time for coming up with these encounters. But when a determination is made, we work it in somehow into the story.
Yeah.
That's all that we're saying.
Yeah, and we give it a level of detail that makes it interesting for the players to encounter and relevant for the players to encounter.
Yeah.
He continues, the proper use of the breath weapon is an art. Fortunately, the dragon has had lots of practice. The best use would depend on the breath's particular shape, in other words, cone, line, etc. Often it should be used to take out the big boys in a party. Other times it would be useful to kill many low-level characters at once. So, again, imparting intelligence to the use of the dragon's skill set is important, rather than just, I'm doing the dragon is going to use their breath weapon. roll a random die and see who it hits in the party. No, the dragon is going to know what to do with its breath weapon. It's going to use it to the best advantage it can. That should be reflected in your actions that you ascribe to the dragon.
Yeah.
A couple more things here. Tactical retreat is a listing that he has here. If all of his efforts should fail and the invaders reach his lair, the dragon should have some sort of advantage of position. That's why he chose that lair in the first place. For example, his breath weapon will probably cover an entrance to his lair that the invaders must come through. It is not necessary for him to expose himself to missile fire from adventurers by standing in the entrance. If he chooses a twisting cavern, that's what he should do. Or he should be away from the entrance. Perhaps he will roll boulders down on the invaders as they climb a cliff or trail to his lair. A little thought will produce other possibilities. If the dragon is smart, he will have a back way out. True, he may have to leave behind a good part of his treasure, but he may be able to harass the party on their way back to their what they consider safety. In any case, he who runs away lives to fight another day. And that's another thing that I've seen happen all too often, and I have been guilty of doing this in the past. Again, not ascribing intelligence to creatures who should have intelligence. Not every creature, I don't care what it is, orc, ogre, whatever, is going to fight to the death every time.
Yeah.
They are going to realize that they're getting into a bad situation, and the self-preservation instinct is going to kick in, and they're going to leave. And we haven't done that all the time.
Especially the super smart ones.
Yes.
If you're fighting a lich or, I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. Any of these super big, kind of boss-like bad dudes that you might be fighting, or good dudes, whatever your alignment is. They will have thought this out beforehand. They'll know that if something attacks them, this is their escape plan. And it might be a magical ability they have, they might have a potion, or they might just have a door they go through and close. And I think that, knowing that as the character, means that you can plan out how you will make sure that that doesn't happen. I don't know how you would maybe do it, but that's something that if you have, again, that consistency of knowing that these big bad characters will behave in a certain way, a way to try and protect themselves in self-preservation, most of the time, of course, then they can plan out how to try and make sure that, again, just make sure that doesn't happen.
Right. So just to wrap up this article, he comes to, in his conclusion, he comes to say, I have tried to point out some of the advantages a smart dragon would have. This would allow dragons to put up a better fight than the one that was described at the beginning of this article. The answer to the Novice GM's problem is that it is not necessary to bring out the bigger dragons, or what you need to do is bring out the smarter dragons. Your players will be forced to learn how to play their characters intelligently. So important to everything that we talk about in this channel.
Yeah.
Without such stimulus, though, the smart dragon being the stimulus, your players will never develop their skills. I have seen too many supposedly experienced players, I've seen this too, I have seen too many supposedly experienced players ripped apart when first placed in a situation where the monsters act with even a teaspoonful of brains. Usually, these players had the misfortune to play for years in the same small group where none of the GMs ever ran their monsters with any thought.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're all about on this channel. We love to play the game through intelligent action on the part of the monsters and the NPCs and the players. And if you don't think your way through things, I'm very often called a deadly dungeon master. I am. But that usually only happens when the players do not think their way through a situation and only choose to fight their way through a situation.
Yeah.
And to me, it's always a much more fun game to play when you are thinking your way through the situation.
Yeah. Fighting is a tool that you can use in your overall plan to accomplish something. But it shouldn't necessarily be your go-to for everything that you try to do. And again, it's consistency. I know I've said that quite a few times, but if it's always the same expectation that you as players have of, well, this is smart, so it's probably going to behave in this way, it's a good thing, because then you can prepare not only through like buying the right stuff and getting the right spells, but you can try and learn about whatever it is you're going to be fighting. Like we always say in these videos, one of our best resources when he's the DM is to go to the library. If you have characters who can read, and like you're in a big city, and you can learn about certain aspects of whatever it is you're going to be attacking or wherever you're going. And if that's always the case, you have a tool that you can use.
Right, or you go and you find the people who know about them.
Exactly.
You go to the dragon expert. You go
Yeah.
to whoever might be able to give you information to help you better find yourself, to help you find yourself in a better situation when you confront something that's really bad and deadly and might kill you. If you go into it blind, you're going to die in my campaign.
Yeah.
So anyway, just thought this was interesting, and this goes clear back to November of 1981. A big thank you to Howard Mailer for writing this article. If Howard Mailer happens to be out there, or if you know anything about him, let us know, because I would love to see some more things that he has created over time.
Absolutely.
But Training the Novice GM from Different Worlds Magazine, November 1981. If you have any questions or comments about this, leave them down below. And I think that's all we've got for this particular video.
Yeah, all the links are down below in the description. Go take a look. We won't burden you with the rant about that. The only thing we will say is we do have a newsletter coming out soon that will provide updates on Old Warlock Games, the sponsor of today's video, and everything that those cool cats are doing over there. So
if you go ahead.
If you would like to subscribe to our newsletter, just send us an email at officialoldwarlock@gmail.com saying that you would like to be a subscriber, and we will send that PDF along to you guys whenever it's time to publish one.
And we're looking at 3, 4, maybe 5 times a year for the email, but or for the PDF of the newsletter. But you never know what cool stuff might be in there.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that brings us to a close for this video. I am Jim.
I'm Alex.
Keep your sword on free.
Goodbye.